Welcome to episode 105 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on July 11th, 2023. We are continuing on with our series of interviews with contributors to issue 3 of the Journal of Scottish Yarns. Today, I have an interview to share with both Alison Mayne of knitrospective.com and Roni the Woolchemist. Alison is the designer of the Robach Shawl, which featured yarn dyed by Roni. It was lovely to get to meet both of these ladies, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy our chat just as much as I did. Before we begin, there are a few of the Shetland Hogmanay boxes still available at store.ithoughtIknewhow.com. The boxes this year contain full 25-gram balls of fingering weight yarn from 5 different Shetland wool producers for a total of 30 balls of Shetland wool. It's a mystery box, so you will open 1 ball per day through December leading up to Hogmanay, which is what is known as New Year's Eve in the rest of the world. On New Year's Eve, you will have a special package of gifts from Shetland as well as a pattern for your home designed by Terry Laura, a Shetland-based designer who is known for her skills at choosing color, Fair Isle knitting, teaching, and designing. The price of the box includes the cost of shipping. There are 2 colorways to choose from this year. One is more spring shades and the other is more wintry. Learn more and place your order at store.ithoughtIknewhow.com. As I mentioned in the last episode, I was away on a trip for the last 10 days or so. My husband and I went to Normandy for our 22nd anniversary. It was a fantastic trip. We spent time in Rouen, Bayeux, Mont-Saint-Michel, and Chartres, and a few other spots along the loop that we drove. I'll share some audio from that trip and a bit of a travel log with the fiber highlights in the next episode, which should come to you next week. I know many of you are taking part in the summer make-along with the Journal of Scottish Yarns. That's taking place on Instagram in the I Thought I Knew How Facebook group and in the I Thought I Knew How Ravelry community. You don't have to be in all of those places. Just pick one to take part in. We post weekly challenges for folks to respond to, and then there's a weekly prize supplied by the Journal. There are also a series of Instagram Lives taking place on the I Thought I Knew How Instagram account. You can find the first 2 on my feed already. There's another one coming up on the Wednesday after this episode goes live with Alison and Roni. So if, after hearing the interview with them, you'd like to ask a follow-up question, get that email to me by 1 p.m. on Wednesday, July 19th, and I'll ask them for you. You can send that to anne@ithoughtIknewhow.com. As I record this episode, I'm getting very close to finishing my Macaire tank top, designed by Marion Holland. This after I decided to start over when I got about halfway through the first time because I realized I was making it a size too big. Thankfully, a long flight back to the US during the daytime was a good opportunity to get caught up. I suspect I'll have it done by the time this episode goes live, and then I'll be off to make either the Magnolia cowl or the twine bag. I haven't decided which one to do next. I can't remember if we talked about it in the interview or after, but I also picked up some yarn to knit the Robach Shawl while I was on my trip. There are just so many projects in issue 3 of the Journal of Scottish Yarns that I want to knit. If you have been on the fence about picking up the journal, there is still a £3 off coupon code available for either the print or the digital version. Visit yarnjournal.com to order and use ITIKH3, the number 3, for £3 off the print copy and ITIKH3DIG for £3 off the digital download. The articles are every bit as fascinating as the projects are lovely and wearable. It's absolutely worth the price, even more so with the discount. Okay, we need to move on to the interview. I have to say that it was an absolutely delightful experience for me to sit down with Alison Mayne and Roni to talk with them about their crafting history, the work they're doing in the fiber sphere, and their collaboration on the Robach Shawl. These women really complement one another, and their friendship and respect for one another's crafts really shone. Alison is a designer who also researches textiles and the intersection of craft and mental health. You can find more about her at her website, knitrospective.com. Roni is a hand dyer and knitting teacher who draws inspiration from the Scottish countryside as well as the landscapes of her favorite books and stories, and can be found on social media and Etsy as The Woolchemist. Please enjoy our time together, and I'll see you again on the other side. Roni and Alison, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So it's a little different this time because I have two of you to talk to. So first, I'm going to talk to Alison for a bit, and then Roni, I'd like to talk to you after that, and then we'll talk together about the wonderful project you came up with for the Journal of Scottish Yarns. So Alison, I'm going to throw you the question I always start with for people when I'm doing an interview, and that is, how did you get started with crafting, sort of specifically fiber crafts? How did you get into that?
Well, I'm quite a late bloomer compared to a lot of people, I think. I've always been interested in textiles, but for me as a teenager, my first love was needle-related textiles. So, and the smaller the better. So it was about needlepoint and cross-stitch and miniatures and that sort of thing. And then about 10 to 12 years ago, I became quite unwell and I couldn't hold a needle. And my brain was full of bees. I was going crackers, not being able to do any crafting. And my daughter was at university and she'd taught herself how to crochet as part of managing her own good mental health. And I kind of love it that in contrast to the usual fibre craft story of mums and daughters, it goes the other way for us because she taught me how to crochet. So I could hold this really chunky yarn and I think it was like an 8mm crochet hook in my fist because I could grip that and I could make something, and which calmed me enormously and really helped both my physical and mental health. And that was it. That was it for me. And that led to more and more crochet. I taught myself to knit after that. I still do a lot of crochet, but I really fell hard for knitting. And that's how it all began. Like so many people from a kind of like rock bottom place, knitting saved my life, like so many of us.
Yeah, well, especially in recent times with the COVID and the lockdowns, there was a huge boom of it. Yeah. Was this before you, because you are a textile researcher?
Yes, all related. So I was an English teacher in a secondary school at that time. Okay. Yes, so all connected. So that my own personal journey led me to think about the impact of craft and health. And there was just a wonderful moment in the middle of the night. One night, my husband said, "If you could do anything at all, what would it be?" I said, "I think I'd like to do a PhD about crafting and well-being." And he went, "All right, then let's do it." So I put in an application. Was lucky enough to start a PhD, which ended up being focused on knit and crochet and how people used it to manage their mental health well-being, but particularly about sharing that on social media and on Facebook. People who crafted alone at home but shared their making to a community on social media, which, as you say, in our pandemic times, we realise now has become so important to people. But we had no idea of these things when I was first working on it. But yeah, that's how that personal story came first and then led me to that research work.
I'm really curious about that. So for your methodology, I imagine you were probably doing a lot of interviews for that, as opposed to just sort of observing on social media how people were using it, or a blend of both, or?
It was an unusual methodology in that what I did was I set up a specific closed Facebook group for the research. Mm-hmm. So those people who were interested in taking part came and joined the group, knowing that it was focused on doing that research. So the group itself was focused on the research, but was also its own supportive yarn making community, like those things are. And then when my research element was complete, it was its own standalone supportive group. And some of the really active members decided they were able to continue as moderators of that group. So I could withdraw, knowing that community could still carry on. Yeah, it was set up for research purposes, but it became this really amazing, supportive, Facebook community group, which was designed completely around supporting each other's mental health through sharing making together. It was brilliant.
That is brilliant. So that was your PhD work. Do you have other avenues of research that you have pursued as well when it comes to textiles and mental health, or just textiles in general?
Yes, I've done some other work in collaboration. There's a fantastic organisation in the UK called the Stitching Together Network, where I collaborated with a group about producing guidelines for people who wanted to do any kind of participatory work using stitching with groups, and that was really fantastic. And I've moved more in recent years into two areas about living in this fantastic country, Scotland. So some of that's been more about textile history. Been doing some more work recently on local Scottish yarn mills from the 19th and 20th centuries, and also some more contemporary work about the Scottish yarn industry now and small independent businesses, yarn dyers, small farms, and what they need to flourish and sustain themselves in the current climate. So that's where my research work is focused now.
Are you researching the modern makers for different publications? Is it for government bodies or just pure curiosity?
At the moment, that work is independent. I'm still campaigning to get that work funded so that it can go to government bodies so that the sector can get the support it needs.
That's wonderful to know that you're doing that, because I know it's very needed on both sides of the pond, that someone be advocating for these smaller companies and the positive impact that they can have on, economy, environment, culture. So that's wonderful. That's really great to hear. What are some of the discoveries that you've made along the way that maybe you weren't expecting, or that really struck you as you were maybe doing your PhD or this work with the modern maker?
The most interesting thing that came out of the PhD research, it's a really common held belief and an understandable belief that knitting is really good for you. I started this introduction by saying, knitting saved my life. And we know it has these incredible positive benefits about feeling accomplished and that sense of community and belonging and all of these positive things. Physical dexterity, it affects your physical health, your brain waves, all of these amazing things. One of the findings from my PhD was also a reminder that is not always the case. And it can have the potential to have a negative impact on people's well-being too. It can open up a space for people to get in a bit of a cycle about negative self-talk. It can make people feel more isolated rather than less isolated. And the important thing for that is to make sure that it's not used as just a sticking plaster to say, go away and do some knitting in the same way, go away and do some yoga. Whereas actually what we should be doing is making sure that there's money going into proper infrastructure to support people's physical and mental health. It's not a panacea that cures all ills. It's brilliant, but it doesn't solve everything, and it's not an answer for everybody. It's just something that people need to be aware of. It was one of the more uncomfortable findings maybe of the PhD research. That doesn't always make me popular, that one.
No, but I think that's something where if you're on the knitting communities long enough, I think you see that from time to time, where people can really engage in a lot of negative self-talk. And unfortunately, I don't think that, like, now that now that you've articulated it, I wonder how well we as members of the online community handle that, because I think a lot of it's just like, oh, just keep trying, just, you'll get there, which can feel positive and uplifting in a certain case. But if it's really not the fix for that person or the tool for that person that it's been for someone else, then it's like trying to use a hammer as a screwdriver.
Yeah. And if you've got the people are really interested in the idea of social prescribing, so you don't have medicine, don't have counselling, have knitting, for example, that might work really well for some people. And for some people, it's not knitting, it's something else, maybe singing, maybe gardening.
Right.
And other people need the counselling, and people need the medicine. So it's not an either or.
No, that's something to keep in mind as we're doing this. It is okay to step away from
absolutely
from the hobby we think is going to be a solution.
Absolutely.
So you have this research portion of your craft life that you are engaging in now too, but there's also, I guess, just for lack of a term, I would say you have the practical side as well, where you're designing and teaching. And how did that come to be? How did you start doing that? Because as you say, you're a late bloomer, but at the same time, you're already a teacher. So.
Yeah, I suppose that's part of it too. I just can't help myself with the whole teaching thing. It's in me. The designing happened, I think, partially because of travel. I was doing my PhD in Sheffield, and we'd moved up to near Edinburgh, and I was on the train a lot, and I was knitting a lot, and just, I think, I don't know, I might have been procrastinating from my studies. I don't know what was happening, but I just had loads and loads of ideas. And I just started to pull together ideas for shawls. I think because they were easily transportable. They're still my very favourite thing to knit and wear. And they could be stuffed in a bag when I was on a train. And there were all of these ideas that were spilling out of me. So as my PhD kind of came to a close, I found that there were all these ideas in a notebook. And I decided to try and put some of those out there once the PhD was done. And that's when Knit Collective started. And it's my Viva-versary today, in fact.
Oh, wow.
5 years ago today. The PhD was done, and I thought, let's see what happens. And I launched Knitrospective just to see.
Oh, wonderful. Well, that's congratulations. Happy 5 years. I feel like I should have had a cake ready or something. You said shawls are your favorite thing to design. Have you done other designs too? Or do you mainly stick with shawls?
It's been mostly accessories. So I've done quite a lot of mitts. I've done a collection of mitts inspired by working on a research project up at Dunolly Castle near Oban, for example. So working with their archives and other wristlets and some stoles, but shawls are my big thing. I'm starting to work on garments. I'm doing a fantastic course with a designer and teacher called Natalie Warner at the moment. As a design mentor. She's been brilliant. So I'm starting to look at that, but shawls are my first love, for sure.
With the Donnelly Castle collection, are those items that you are selling patterns for, or are you knitting them for sale there? Or
they are a gift from me to them for the time they hosted me as a researcher in their archive. So you can get the patterns from their shop, and I believe that they sometimes have completed knitted samples of them you can also buy in their shop, because they have a wonderful crafting group that works there at the castle that do lots of amazing textiles things there.
Well, Alison, I'm going to pause with you for a moment. We're going to come back to you in a few moments because, of course, I have you and Roni on today because you work together for the Robach Shawl. But I wanted to talk to Roni for a little bit before we talked about that. So Roni, welcome again to the show. How did you get started in fiber crafts? I know you have a bit of a different journey because it's taken you to a different place.
Certainly a little bit different. I think mine was more of the traditional, or should have been, because I come from a very, very long line of needle workers, knitters, crocheters, my grandmother, mom, aunts, everybody in the family, for as far as I can remember, they've all been wonderful crafters. And my mom tried to teach me and failed to teach me because I was just not having it. It was boring. She handed me the squeaky acrylic yarn with the straight needles and do garter shawl or just a scarf, and no, it was boring. So I never knit or crocheted anything until I was pregnant with my first child, at which point I wandered into a shop and just got a very basic crochet hook, and I thought, I'm going to try this. Let's check YouTube, see what happens. And I taught myself how to crochet, and I just absolutely loved it. And I've noticed that after a couple of weeks, I was just making beautiful things. Everybody told me you have to practice for months to get even tension. And all of a sudden I had these beautiful baby garments and they were pretty. So I was like, this is for me. And I've done that for 5 years. Whilst watching my older sister, who is a wonderful knitter also, making these most amazing garments. And I was so jealous, like envied her pieces, because knitting it creates a completely different type of garment. And she was like, come on, if you can crochet, you can knit. Come on, just try it. So she bought me my first skein of hand-dyed wool from a Hungarian dyer and encouraged me to try knitting. And I bought some basic kit of needles and taught myself, again, off the wonderful YouTube, just videos watching, and taught myself to knit. And just like Alison, even though crochet was my first love, knitting is my real love, because ever since I started knitting, I barely crochet, I must admit. Knitting just took me by a storm, and I just knit. I consider a day where I didn't pick up my needles a completely wasted day of my life. I just feel like something is missing from that day.
I agree. And I have to say, I'm a third person, started with crochet, moved into knitting, and then was like, oh, knitting's so wonderful. But I do still. In fact, I'm crocheting right now. As my project for the make along right now is the Macaire tank top designed by Marion Holland. And I'm loving doing the crochet again, but at the same time, I have a knit project on the side I'm working on too, that I pick up into a little bit every day. I might have a problem. I don't know. It's a wonderful problem to have.
I think it's normal. I like to cheat on my knitting with some crochet every now and again as well.
Yeah.
It's just both words. And also when I knit too much and I have certain pains, crochet is not gonna hurt the same parts. So I can rest my wrist by crocheting a bit.
That's right. Different muscle groups. It's perfect to go from one to the other. And even, if you wanted to get into the cross stitch and embroidery too, that's different as well. It's smart. It's cross training is what it is.
It is, yeah, but also they give you so many different opportunities and you can even mix them. I did a wonderful project a few years ago when my little boy was a newborn. I did a crochet stole, like a shawl, and it was first crocheted with single crochet and then it was embroidered with cross stitch afterwards.
Oh, beautiful.
Beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. I think I should probably frame it and put it on a wall or something.
I love that. But that's not all you do as well. So you are the dyer of the Woolchemist yarns. When did you start dyeing your own wool?
Well, hand-dyed wool was basically a love before I even know how to knit, because of what my sister just gave me one. And I thought, this is so much better because of the colors. It's just not a same plain, simple something. This is playing with colors. It just appealed to me. So I just went down this rabbit hole and I actually didn't buy any other wool than hand-dyed from different dyers, mainly from Hungary at the time, even though I already lived here in Scotland. But I was always a part of the Hungarian knitting and crochet community and the hand dyers' own little communities. It's a very, very strong, lovely community, very supportive. Even the dyers are so supportive of each other, not just the people who knit, but the dyers. They have projects together, they encourage each other. And it's so lovely to see that they don't look at each other as concurrents or what's the word for that?
Not in competition, but
thank you.
Collaborating.
Yes, they are colleagues rather than competitors, which is lovely to see. So I didn't think then this is something I want to do. I just loved the yarns and collected a huge stash, as we all do. But then I had my kids, they grew up slowly. I was working part-time jobs, we don't have any family here in the country. So it's just my husband and I to look after the kids. So we were like ships passing in the night, always doing opposite shifts, looking after the children. And then when they were big enough to be more independent, they both were in school, and I hit 40, that is usually a logical time for people to kind of reevaluate what they're doing with their lives. And I used to be creative. I used to be a graphic designer before I moved to the UK. So colors and design and all that is very close to me. I have a degree in marketing, and everything to do with this was kind of natural. Now that I'm a dyer, I see why that path was actually the right path for me. I had the urge to change my life, but it wasn't until a major health scare that I actually have done it. And this is so many times the case. I hear the stories. The more I share my story, the more I find that that was the case with so many people, that you have to have a big scare before you really look at your life and dare to make that leap of faith and change. And so on my 40th birthday, my family had me on a Zoom call, and they said, our gift to you is, I don't even know how many kilograms of undyed wool. Please start your business.
Oh, how wonderfully supportive.
I mean, they're fantastic. I mean, my sister is my biggest rock. And obviously husband was from the get-go absolutely behind it, because he's seen that I'm not fulfilled making coffee or cleaning or whatever I have ever done. And even though I haven't actually dyed, apart from trying with a home dye kit once, I just knew that I can do this. So this is one of those things that I didn't start dyeing at home for myself for years, and then I thought it would be a business. It was just a big calling. I'm going to go for this because this is something I can do. I draw and paint, and I can do the digital designs, and I love color. I understand color just instinctively. Even I didn't study color deeply. And I thought, I have to try this. And it was something that straight from the beginning, I had such great response from everybody around me that, oh, this looks beautiful. This is amazing. So very, very quickly, it went from a small idea into a growing little business.
I know that you've done shows before where you've taken your wool to different places. How long was it from making the decision to do, your family gifted you all of this wool so you could take the leap, to being a public, I am dyeing wool dyer?
Well, from the decision to opening an online shop and creating an online presence on Instagram, Facebook, and Facebook group, it was about 2 months. So I just dyed up a big batch so I can take some beautiful pictures, design my own logo. Being a graphic designer saved me so much money as well, because everything I do is just me. There's nobody else involved in this. I'm doing everything just myself. It was 2 months before the shop opened, and then Alison found me through that shop, actually through my web shop, got a yarn from me, or two actually, little mini fade sets. And after buying the yarn, contacted me and said, we are actually really close. I had no idea, but we live really close by, and said, look, this is who I am. How about you maybe taking on your first yarn show that she was at the time also involved in organizing? And I was so scared. I'm like, no, I'm too small. I wouldn't dare. But without her, I wouldn't have dared. I'm so glad I did, because it was a lovely experience. And she held my hand throughout and encouraged me. Being a baby dyer with no experience, she got information for me from other very experienced, long-standing dyer businesses who helped me decide on, what to take, how much to prepare, what I need, which was huge. And it was such a lovely experience to have all that support pouring in for somebody brand new.
That is wonderful. My heart grows 3 sizes. That's just wonderful to hear. Again, it's the idea of collaborating and being colleagues rather than being competitors. I love that. And that, I'm sure that was such an important step for you, because hand-dyed wool, it is such a tactile experience. People want to see it in person. They want to feel it. And so even as a baby dyer, I'm sure that was a huge step to actually be able to get it into people's hands like that.
Many people tell me, we try to take the best pictures possible, but nothing can give back the feel together with the site when you are there in person. And then you can actually experience the person behind, because what my experience is that people often don't buy from you because of your product. They buy from you because of your person.
They want to know the story behind the yarn. Yeah. I try and convince people all the time. You know, it's not about your label. It's your story. You need to get your story out there because people love supporting people.
Yep. And they want to find that personal connection.
Right.
And I know that there is so many wonderful dyers, and even from the Hungarian guys that I know, most of them, and buy from many of them, that you just connect to some of them even more than to others on a personal level. And inevitably, you're going to go back there and find their colors, because their colors speak to your heart and soul as well. So the personal connection there is very, very important.
Roni, as you are choosing colors, you said you didn't study color deeply. I know as a graphic designer, though, you do have to study color. I mean, that's part of the training. But as you're coming up with your colorways now, as you're designing your yarns, where do you draw that inspiration from?
I mean, I don't know if I design my yarns. I think I kind of throw the colors on my blank canvas, which is the yarn, most of the time, although sometimes obviously I premeditate what I'm going to do on the skeins. But my biggest inspiration from the very first few batches that I ever created was always stories. I love stories. I love to read. I've always been a great reader, raised my kids to be readers as well. And we always share stories in my family ever since I was a child. I was read to a lot. Always my parents own a many thousands volumes library in their house, and every wall is full of books. And my favorite genre is fantasy and high fantasy. And I've got lots of favorite authors and my favorite series. I love books which have more than one volume, because I just don't want to say goodbye to characters. So my biggest inspiration is characters from my favorite stories, characters and places that are often just in my mind, because many of these stories from smaller authors doesn't make it to the big screen and doesn't get adapted to movies. So I have a lot of colors inspired by stories, characters and places in stories. And then obviously I can't not say it, because it would be a lie if I said that Scotland the Beautiful wouldn't inspire me, because I mean, look outside. There is no way that you, as a dyer or any creative person, won't be inspired by what you see around you. I come from a beautiful country. Hungary is a beautiful country, beautiful nature. But I think if people vote these famous lists of most beautiful places in the world, Scotland always ends up in the top 5, and there is a reason why. And I don't think anybody would begrudge a title of, if not the most beautiful, one of the most beautiful countries in the whole world is Scotland. I'm so grateful to live here and to experience this every single day.
Undeniably true, I think. I absolutely agree with you. I did see in, I think your Etsy shop, that you have a dye to order option for customers. And I'm just curious how that works. So if I was interested in that, would I contact you and say, you know, I want something sort of pink, or like I want something like this kind of flower, or how do you do dye to order for someone else?
So this is actually so interesting, because it was Alison who called me a color magician just the other day in one of her posts. That's so flattering. Dye to order works 2 ways. First of all, I always, 99% of the time, I record my work process and I attempt to repeat my colors, and I have recipes for them. So if I ever dye the color, chances are I have the recipe and I will be able to reproduce that color again. Not exactly the same due to the nature of hand dyeing, but pretty similar. Mm-hmm. So I have listings in my shop, and I have a photo album on my page and in my Facebook group with repeatable colorways. People can come and say, okay, I want this color, and I re-dye that for them. Send a photo just to make sure they're happy. So that's the easier part. The custom orders, however, now that's my favorite thing to do. And Alison is best inspiration, because she comes up with the craziest things. Can you do this? And it's like, of course I can. I get like so excited, because she knows now. Because some people, I think, are anxious about asking me for their own personal ideas, and if I can translate them onto yarn. But I have a few friends, Alison being one of them, and I have another few friends who know I love this and specifically come to me because they say, oh, my husband is a huge fan of this football team. And I'm talking a real story here. Cheryl, my lovely friend, my husband loves this football team and I want to make him socks in the color of the old jersey before the current one. And this is what it looks like, this yellow and green. And can you? And I copy that and try my best to reproduce it on yarn, and that's great. But if it's a little bit more vague, like, for example, I don't know, but this was one of my favorite current stories. A lady I know only online, but we are really close. She lost her pet, her little Westie doggy last year. And she was absolutely heartbroken, understandably. And she contacted me to say, I want some yarn from you. My soul and my heart craves something muted, tonal, and I just pull towards gray. And I'm really sad because the anniversary is coming up. I'm not in a good place. Dye me a fade set. Pink, maybe a little bit. Blue, gray, tonal, make it happen. And I dyed a fade set for her in four skeins, ranging from a moody grayish blue towards a taupe, and then pink accents on the other end. And it's absolutely stunning. I almost didn't want to give it away, except it was for her and I love her and I wanted her to have it. And I called it Last Walk on the Beach as the memory of her little dog. And the fuchsia pink is associated between us with her doggy, Panika. So the moody storm clouds and sand and water and the little dog, everything like that told a story. And these are the projects that I'm so proud of and that I want to send out to the world for people to actually personally connect to that yarn.
What a beautiful opportunity. Wow. I love that. I mean, I love the idea of working with a designer for a custom order, because I have tried dyeing myself. And it's not as easy as it looks, I don't think, to get something that's really workable, to get what's in your brain out onto the yarn, for one thing, and to have it be something that really works in a piece. I think it takes practice and insight and knowledge of color. I think a lot of people think that dyeing is just easy peasy, and then they try it. So I'm going to keep you in mind, Roni, for those custom orders.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the Robach Shawl. So it sounds like you ladies are used to collaborating and working together.
Yes.
How did this one come together?
Well, I had this fantastic opportunity to work with Susan Anderson, who you've already had on the podcast. And she invited me to design a shawl for the journal. And the theme was spring flowers. And at the time, I'd just finished doing some research on Margaret Fay Shaw, who was an amazing ethnologist and Scottish folklorist from the Isle of Canna, from New York originally, and then lived most of her life on the Isle of Canna. And she initially lived on Uist, initially just in her early 20s, with these two sisters, Peggy and Mari McRae, and then continued with this kind of fantastic friendship with them, particularly with Peggy, Andrew McRae, for the rest of their lives. And I just finished designing a shawl called Peggy Andra, which is inspired by her life. And I think I was probably thinking a lot about Uist and as an island in the Outer Hebrides. And I knew about in the Maca of North Uist, you have this incredibly rare marsh orchid, and it only grows there. It's not anything really flashy. It's just a couple of inches tall. It's a quiet kind of pink through to a magenta pink. Mm-hmm. It doesn't last very long, but it only grows there. And I just think it's just one of those amazing things about this place yet again. So I thought, so that really inspired me. The design, the shape of this little flower inspired me. So I started to play around with charting out whether I could come up with the orchid shape, I suppose, through lace. So that's what started off the the initial sample of the Robach Shawl. I'm also a huge fan of Elizabeth Zimmerman and pie shawls and her unventing of knitting and how encouraging she is in her writing, saying, have a go, do things, try things out, make things your own. So I knew I wanted to do a pie shawl and do this big sort of generous half circle. So that's how the design came about. So I knew I could play around with spring flowers, and Ewis took me to the Hebridean marsh orchid, and Robach is one of the handful of places in North Uist that these flowers grow. So that's how the shawl came about, very organically, really. And then I knew that I was quite cheeky, really, because normally Susan will pair up a designer with a Scottish yarn producer that she would like to feature in the journal. And I said, can I please use Roni's yarn? Because I knew the colours were so vibrant and would give us such interesting range of colourways. So we started out with the initial samples that you see in the journal of the colourway that Roni very generously then renamed Marsh Orchid, that deep purple, which is the colour that you see most of the time. If you Google Hebridean Marsh Orchids, you'll see that colour. And then she had another, again, Scottish landscape-inspired colourway of the slightly more muted pinks and greens of the moorlands. But then she also, and this is why I think she's a colour magician, started to come up with other things instead of me being a bit literal, why not do it in a hot coral? Why not do it in the same colour but in the two different fibres? And just playing around with sort of different intensities of colour, which obviously create really different effects. So that's how that came about. I don't know if you want to add any more to your sort of how it came about.
No, apart from that I was absolutely humbled and delighted that I got to be featured in such a prestigious publication and with such a gorgeous, absolutely show-stopping design. So this is one of those moments in your professional life when you can't believe your lucky stars. But that's been ever since you actually entered my little sphere. So I like to refer to Alison as my fairy godmother. I have said this more often than not. I don't know what I've done to deserve you. But it's been such a great, beautiful friendship and professional relationship, because I like to think that I get her. So if she comes up with an idea and she says, this is what I'm working on, do you have something? And then we come up with yarns, even existing colorways, but then pair it with something else. Let's see what this looks like. And it comes to something. I think it's a little bit like songwriters, that one writes the melody and the other one comes up with the lyrics, isn't it?
Yes.
And then it's a hit.
Yes, Bernie Taupin and Elton John. I don't know who's who. I don't know who's who.
Simon and Garfunkel or whatever.
One of the things I love about the shawl design is that you used the two different types of yarn together. So you have the mohair silk blend where you find the lace work for the flower, and you also have the merino nylon. Am I remembering right?
This is merino silk, but you can alternate it with merino or merino nylon as well. These are all bases that I do dye. Anything finger will work.
Was that your intention at the beginning, Alison, to have the two different textures incorporated into the shawl?
Yes, because I think we see this really good quality mohair now, and it's some people are still a little bit wary, I think I'm finding, of mohair. They still maybe have associations of a sort of terrible 70s or 80s scratchy memory. But the quality of the yarn, it is so butter soft and gentle. I think it needs celebrating for a start. And also, I think I'm certainly a terrible one for you'll buy something and then you think, what am I going to do with this one skein I've just fallen really hard for? And I wanted to do something where I could pair a mohair lace and a 4-ply together to show how they can really collaborate together and make something beautiful together without being really samey. They don't have to match exactly. You can pick up tones and have them look kind of different, or sometimes dramatically so. I mean, the one I'm doing again for myself is this ridiculous hot orange mohair with a rainbow merino to be really kind of loud. This was a custom dye for me. I showed Roni a dress I'm wearing for a conference in September. I said, I need a shawl that's going to make me feel confident. Have at it. You do me a colourway you think's going to work. And she did. And it's like, it's time for you to be more confident. So here's some really confident colours. So it can be really kind of wow, or it can be like terrifically subtle and muted. So I just think it's lovely to celebrate the two different textures instead of thinking just use one thing or the other.
Yeah, I've seen that colorway on your Instagram, and it is bold.
I'm gonna say this: when her face was a picture when she saw it. She saw it in skein form first, and the orange mohair is UV reactive. So if she goes to a party and there is a black light there, that's gonna be epic. So she's seen the color in the skeins first, and her face was an utter picture. I think she suddenly pictured the whole process of her actually knitting this up and wearing it, and everybody's gonna look. And then I just quickly wound it up, and as soon as she saw it in the skein, obviously in the bowl, it looks completely different. And then she was like, okay, it will be fine. But yeah, it's going to be very, very bright and bold. But that was the point.
That's the point. The point is colour to make you feel confident. So
that's right. You nailed it again, Roni. Well done.
I can't wait to see it, honestly. And I called that colorway. Was just for Alison. I'm not going to do this for anybody else. It's also a technique which is much more time consuming. So this is just for very special people. I do this rainbow style dyeing, but I called the color Your True Colors because she has to know. She has to know that.
Well, I know that this has been a popular choice for the knit along, the Robach Shawl. I can think of a half dozen people just off the top of my head I've been following on Instagram knitting it. And it's so interesting because, as you said earlier, you really can play around with it because you do have the two different textures. So you can have two samey, you can have two really bold, you can have, too muted, or there's a lot of scope for the imagination with it. And I appreciate that. I recently, I don't have it to hand, actually. It's still upstairs from unpacking, but I may have picked up some yarn on my trip to make myself one. Because I just was at a fiber festival and they had the mohair version of their yarn, and with the merino version, I was like, well, that looks like a Robach shawl as a baby and it needs to come home and grow up. So So I'm looking forward to casting one on as well and playing with that difference in the texture. And also, again, I'm so glad that you said it, Alison. The mohair of today is so much better than, 20, 30 years ago. I don't know what the breeders have done, but they've done something. It's a completely different experience to knit with mohair now than it was, for our mothers and grandmothers. I don't know how, you look at the sweaters, the mohair sweaters from the 50s and such that they were wearing, and I just think, oh my gosh, I would have itched all over, just top to bottom. I don't know how they did it, but now I'm like, that looks appealing for, winter months. That could be good, very nice.
And, and good, just, great care of animals and, good provenance of looking after.
Yeah.
And then lovely blends, because obviously they're blending it with silk, and it's just, obviously super kids, so it's coming from the youngest of the flock, or whatever you call baby goats. But yeah, absolutely lovely. There's no comparison. I have super sensitive skin, and there's never an issue with this kind of mohair. And ever since I made this, I already made other things combining mohair with merino because of this, because it's just so gorgeous and nothing causes any problems. I have a top which is striped. I have another 2 shawls which combines them, and it's just lovely to wear. So this is something that I don't think anybody will have any reactions to.
Ladies, thank you again for coming on the show. Before we say goodbye, though, I want to give you each an opportunity to tell my listeners what you have coming up in the future, and then how they can learn more about you and keep track of what you're up to.
I will have a couple of bigger yarn festivals coming up very, very shortly. So that's super exciting. The Scottish Yarn Festival, previously known as Perth Festival of Yarn, where I've been accepted. This is my first big one, coming up in September on the 9th and the 10th in Perth. So excited about that. So we are in preparation, and Alison will be my stall buddy over there. She's also part of the designer showcase. She'll tell you more about that. And then a month later, I will also be at the Glasgow School of Yarn Festival, which is also a great opportunity. So I'm very excited about both of those. I am now preparing for both of them. And in terms of just my small business life, I currently am in the process of the pre-order stage of my advent calendars for this year. So that's going. It can be found, information can be found on all my social media about my advents. And I also just recently launched a monthly yarn club, which is a fantastic mystery yarn club. And the theme is Geodes of the Zodiac. So it's inspired by gemstones connected to star signs, and it's been a blast. We are currently in the 2nd month with Leo coming up. Super exciting. So this is going to run for a whole year. So this is my current endeavors in yarn life. And if anybody is interested in anything that I do, I am under the name of The Woolchemist on Instagram and on Facebook. And I've got a lovely little community called Woolchemistry on Facebook. This is a private group, counts about 400 members now. And it's a lovely supportive community of knitters, crocheters, all sorts of makers from all over the world. So if anybody fancies a community like that, I run regular make-alongs over there. Then I also give away prizes of yarn and patterns. So anybody's welcome to join us, and it's a lovely, lovely place to be.
Alison?
Okay, I'm really looking forward to being in Perth at the Scottish Yarn Festival also. Looking forward to being Roni's aproned assistant, helping out at her stall. So I was really honoured to be invited to be part of the designer showcase there, hosted by the Celia McWheely Explorium. And so I will have an opportunity each day to feature my designs in that special space, which will be a great chance to present some of my other designs. There's lots of designs inspired by people and stories, people and places, and architecture. I've got a particular collection called Women in the Stacks, which is inspired by the first women librarians of important or interesting libraries around the UK, just because I'm such a library nerd, basically. And I'm releasing 2 new Women in the Stacks patterns, especially for that designer showcase at Perth for the beginning of September. And then I'm at Knitrospective on Instagram, and I have a website, knitrospective.com, and there's links there about my research and through to my patterns, which are currently available on PayHip.
Thank you very much. And I will have all of that information in the show notes, as well as the things that we talked about during the show. Ladies, thank you again.
Thank you so much for having us. It was a joy to meet you in online person.
Are they not a wonderful pairing? Many thanks again to both Roni and Alison for taking the time to chat with me about their collaboration on the Robach Shawl, as well as their personal craft work and passions. You can find Roni as The Woolchemist on Instagram and Alison Mayne as Knitrospective. You'll find links to their accounts as well as all the other places you can find them online in the show notes. A reminder that if you have follow-up questions for either of them, please send them to me at ann@ithoughtIknewhow.com before this Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and I'll ask them at our Instagram live event that will take place this Wednesday at 2 p.m. I should be back with you in a week with my fiber log of Normandy. In the meantime, keep working on those make-along projects or whatever fiber crafts are bringing you joy this July. I'll be back with you again soon. Until then, thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. The show notes are where you'll find links to the things mentioned in the show, so be sure to check those out. Find me on my social media accounts as I Thought I Knew How, except on Twitter, where it's just Thought I Knew How. The groups on various platforms are all called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time to